Okay, my name is Brucha At, and I was born in 1954 in Detroit, Michigan. When I was 6 years old, my family moved to Los Angeles, and 2 years later we moved to the suburbs. And my whole life growing up in Los Angeles, I was a fish out of water. I never fit in. I was always this short, chubby, curly-haired kid with all these beautiful, long, straight blonde hair, blue-eyed girls that looked great in bikinis, and everybody hung out at the pool all summer, and it was kind of torturous for me. And so I never fit into the whole LA scene, and always wanted to leave. As long as I could remember, I wanted to get out of LA. And also, every day I came home from school and all I did was watch television all afternoon. That was my life. Going to school, doing homework, and watching television. It was a pretty empty existence with not really too many friends and not connected at all. When I was 10 years old, I told my parents that I wanted to learn Hebrew. And I don't really know where or how this idea popped into my brain, because I didn't have any Jewish friends. And there was a part of me that thought, well, wouldn't that be cool to learn another language? Wow, learn another language. It was almost kind of like getting, what it feels like to get drunk or something. It's like a different reality. And my parents were like, what? Why would you want to learn Hebrew? And I was like, I don't know, I just want to learn Hebrew. And they're like, we're not making a bat mitzvah for you. And I'm like, I don't want a bat mitzvah, I just want to learn Hebrew. So my parents had to join a shul, and I started doing bat mitzvah classes, and I started doing Hebrew school twice a week, and I also had to go to Sunday school once a week. And so 3 times a week I was going to the temple, and nobody wanted to be there. None of the kids wanted to be there. I was the only girl in my class. I was in a classroom with all these little boys who were throwing spit wads at the ceiling and doing all sorts of crazy things. Nobody wants to be there, and I was the only one who was there because I wanted to learn Hebrew. I actually ended up having a bat mitzvah in the end, and then after that I never had anything to do with Hebrew. When I was 16, my parents joined a different shul because my brother had to have a bar mitzvah, and I saw that there was a temple youth group and they were going to take a trip to San Francisco. And I was like, oh, I want to go to San Francisco. This was in 1970, right? When the whole hippie, Haight-Ashbury thing was pretty much in full strength. And I was dying to go to San Francisco. And so I joined the temple youth group so I could go to San Francisco. And it was the first time I ever had Jewish friends. And I fit in, and I really loved everybody, and it was amazing to have a chavra for the first time in my life. At the Temple Youth Group, I met my boyfriend Mark, and his parents lived in Topanga Canyon. Now, Topanga Canyon I lived in the suburbs. There was nothing going on in the suburbs, and Topanga Canyon was an interesting place because it was Los Angeles is there's the valley where I grew up, and then there's the city, and then in between the valley and the city there's these canyons that go in between. And the canyons were where all the bohemians and artists and cool people lived. And his parents had a 22-acre ranch in Topanga Canyon, and he had a horse, and I started hanging out with him a lot in Topanga Canyon. Now, this is my first exposure to nature, because I'm living in the suburbs where everybody has manicured lawns and there's nothing natural about anything. And we're going horseback riding up the canyon and to the Topanga Canyon Falls and hiking. And I got really turned on to nature. And besides that, he also had friends who were pretty cool because their parents lived in Topanga Canyon. And so this was my first exposure to something other than middle-class America. And I liked it. I really liked it. Then, let's see, so we were together for 4 years, and we broke up. I decided I cannot move back home again, and there was this thing called the Jewish Co-op. It was like a house that a bunch of people rented all together, and it was like $120 a month for rent, utilities, food. Like it was unbelievable, right? And you had it kept kosher. They kept kosher, and they did Shabbat every week. And this was my first experience of Shabbos and keeping kosher. And they used to sing actually Shlomo songs around the Shabbos table, but I didn't know who Shlomo was at the time. Oh, and I have to also go back a little bit, that when I went on this trip to San Francisco, I did go on this trip to San Francisco when I was 16, and I actually met Shlomo Carlebach for the first time, because the rabbi, we had this kind of hippie rabbi, and he took us to this place called the One World Family Commune with Alan the Messiah, and Shlomo was playing music there that night. And he had everybody like standing around in a big circle with their arms around each other, swaying to his music. And so that was my very first time I ever saw Shlomo or heard of him. And did not hear or see him again until later on in my life. Little did I know that he was going to become an important part of my life. Oh yeah, so at 20 I'm living in the co-op, and we're doing Shabbos, and everybody there in the co-op has gone to Israel, and and I decided I really wanted to go to Israel, and I think this is like 1973 at this point, and the Yom Kippur War had just happened, and my parents are like, absolutely not. So then I'm living in the co-op, and I run into a friend who I haven't seen since high school. And he says to me, oh, do you remember Joel Fisher? And I'm like, Joel Fisher and I, like, we sat next to each other in school. From third grade all the way through high school, we sat next to each other because his name was Fisher and my name was Fiddler. And they always put us together. And he was the only Jewish kid in the class, and I was the only Jewish girl in the class. I mean, so we always had this, like, kasher with each other and a very deep friendship. I said, yeah, what's going on with him? And he's like, oh, he moved to Idaho, he bought land, he built a log cabin, and there I am living in LA, right? And I'm like, oh my God, this is unbelievable. And he's like, yeah, well, he's down visiting right now, his family. Like, I said, give me his phone number, I want to call him. So I call him up on the phone, and he immediately wants to come and see me, and we start seeing each other every day. And then he says to me, like, after 2 weeks, he says to me, I'm going back to Idaho. I've like given my notice at my job, I'm selling my truck, and I'm going back to Idaho. Come with me. Now I'm in college, you know. And like, I don't know, it was like really weird. And there was just this place of like, I'm going to go to Idaho with Joel Fisher and live in his log cabin in the woods, right? So I call up my parents. This is the beginning of my parents' trauma with me. And I said to them, I'm dropping out of college and I'm moving to Idaho with Joel Fisher. And like basically the SHIT hit the fan. My parents lost it. And I think we left like 2 weeks later. And we drove up, I had a little MGB. We had his dog with us in the back seat who ripped up my whole car. And we drive up to Idaho, it's March. And there's 3 feet of snow on the ground. It's like 20 degrees, which is quite cold. I don't know what that is in centigrade, but it's pretty cold. And we drive into this little logging town. It's got like population 4,000. And we go into the cafe where everybody's like loggers, rednecks, farmers, and with moose heads on the walls and you know, stuff like that. And I'm like, oh my God, what did I get myself into, right? And then, so we find a place to live. And we're living in this like Quonset hut kind of place outside of town. And he takes me out to the land, and there's like 3 feet of snow on the ground, right? And all I have are these like crappy rubber boots, and I'm like sinking up to my knees in the snow. And it takes us like, I don't know how long to get out to where his land is. And it's just snow, right? With these kind of funky pine trees, like the ones out in the forest there that are not very healthy looking, right? And there's mosquitoes everywhere, right? And the cabin is like built on a hill, like on the side of a hill kind of, and the floor is at a slant, and there's no windows, and it's pitch black inside. And so he has some like candles all over the place. And when we're going, and then we have to go outside and break branches off the trees in order to make a fire in the wood stove. And at that night, as we're sleeping, we're like rolling down the floor because it's not even. And in the morning, I like flipped out. And I'm like, I'm not living in your cabin in the woods. I'm not. And he's like, but you said you would. And I'm like, I know, but I can't live like this. I can't do this, right? So the whole, it was like the spring. We went into the summer, and he kept bringing me out to the land, you know. And the land was very beautiful in the summertime because it was like there was ferns, really big ferns, and beautiful wild flowers. It was really beautiful in the winter time, in the summertime, not the winter. And there was a creek on the land and stuff like that. And he just started working on me. And so then at some point, and he just kept working on me. And so finally said, okay, I'll move out to the land, right? So we bought a caravan, a trailer. We found this old funky trailer for like $1,000, and we moved it out to the land. We spent one winter in that trailer. We got completely snowed in. We had to buy cross-country skis to get home. We had like a mile of like, this was called the county road that they snow plow, but the private roads they don't. So we had a mile of like private road that wasn't snow plowed, and our car just broke down one day driving home. It just got bogged down in the mud and the snow, and so we went out and bought cross-country skis, and then we had a cross-country ski in and out whenever we needed to go to town. I think at this point I wasn't working. At one point I got a job working in the ski resort. I worked as a waitress a lot of the time. And during this time also, I started working at the health food store, the health food restaurant. It was like a co-op, right? And it was a pretty high consciousness group of people working there. And they were all into health foods, and I was like I didn't know anything about health food really at this point, you know? And so I started eating healthier and becoming more conscious. And then I heard, my friend told me about a yoga class that she was going to that was really great. So I go to the yoga class, and the teacher's like, and this position is good for your kidneys, and this is good for your heart. And I'm already like turned on to this idea of eating healthy. So this whole thing like really turned me on. And her whole thing was like to keep your eyes closed and go inside. And all of a sudden I started becoming very, very aware of my inner life. Like that there's a whole world inside of me that's not out there. And I started becoming more and more spiritual, but I didn't believe in God. And my biggest objection was, well, who created God? So I was really into my teacher. She became like my guru. And she said that she used to do like very deep meditations, and she got told in one of her meditations by her spirit guides that she needed to move to Idaho and start teaching yoga there. To this day, I swear that she was sent to teach me. My husband and I ended up getting married. Joel and I ended up getting married. We had a Justice of the Peace marry us on a hillside with my mother, my father, and the dog, and his best friend. This is like, and this is just kind of to show you how small my social life was and my social circle. Like, I didn't have a lot of friends, and I was doing the yoga with her every week, and then I went to her and I said to her, I want to do transcendental meditation, and it costs like $200, but like I really want to do it. I think it's important. And she says to me, I can teach you meditation, Brucha. I wasn't Brucha at the time. I can teach you meditation, but I'll charge you $10, and we'll donate the money in the end. So let's get a group together and do a meditation thing. So I said, great. So she decided she's going to do a 6-week meditation thing. And so every week we would go, and I got my husband to go with me, and she would talk for the first 45 minutes, and then the very end we would do a meditation. So she was doing a really interesting thing, pulling me in, pulling everybody in, like this, to the point on an intellectual level that I started to admit to myself the possibility of God. And I think it was in the 3rd week, we were doing a meditation together, all of us. And in the middle of the meditation, my whole body filled up with this golden light. And all of a sudden, I just knew God. I felt like my breath was breathing with God's breath. And I don't know, it's a very hard sensation to even describe, but it was so real and such emes, such a truth. And I got up from the meditation and I looked at my husband and I said to him, there is a God in this world and I'm going to serve him with my whole life. And I would walk around in the woods and I started seeing God everywhere. I would look at the leaves on the trees. I would go and I'd see how every bush and every tree had a different kind of leaf, and every tree had a different kind of bark. And the flowers, and I'd pull the flowers apart and see how they were like assembled. And I'm seeing God everywhere, and I'm blowing my mind. And what's happening now is that all I'm doing in my life at this point, besides working, is meditating, reading spiritual books, talking about God, thinking about God, and my husband is losing it. Because he realized, because what happens is when you go from being totally secular to totally spiritual, everything changes. What's important to you, all your priorities in life, what you need to be doing with your life, what life is all about, the meaning of life, everything changes. And when he realized that, he couldn't deal. It was too much for him. And so he became neged, right? And he would see me, I would get up every morning at 6 o'clock and I would meditate for half an hour and I would do all these like affirmations about who knows what. And I was like doing things where I was channeling light, in my third eye and doing all this stuff. And I'm reading all these like esoteric books. And everybody, all my friends, everybody thinks I've gone over the deep end. And basically the people who are in my meditation class and my yoga class have become like my best friends. Because we're all kind of like on the same wavelength. My teacher decides that she's going to start another group for the inner circle. Oh, and she starts doing weird stuff. Like she starts doing like past life regressions on people and channeling. Okay, so also at this time too, I started, because of working in the health food store, the health food restaurant, the vegetarian cooperative health food restaurant, I started meeting all these like freaks who live out in the woods, who were like, I had a whole group of friends who only ate raw food and sprout. They were sproutarians. And they lived in a school bus in the woods. So you go out to visit them, and it's just like snow. They lived like in an abandoned school bus in the snow with trays and trays and trays of sprouts, and all they ate was sprouts. And once in a while they'd come into town and have a cup of coffee, right? And they all were so healthy looking, it was unbelievable. They looked fantastic. And so what started happening is I started developing like a whole chevra of friends that my husband's working at the Evergreen Ford auto parts store, and he's making friends with all the rednecks and the local people who are mechanics, drink beer every night and watch TV. And so we start going like this. So one day I'm meditating, and I'm meditating on I see a picture of myself with white light coming in through the top of my head, and I have this vision of this picture in my mind, and all of a sudden the picture starts going like this, and it gets smaller and smaller and smaller, and I'm following it with my mind, totally concentrated on this vision. And when it gets to the end where it's like a pinpoint, I popped right through the pinpoint and I left my body. And it felt like I was a rubber glove that had gotten turned inside out. And I was like, right? And then I popped right back in my body again. And I'm like, oh my God. Like, it's one thing to like think something or believe something, but to actually experience it and see that it's true was just shocking for me. So I have to say that since that day, and that's probably, we're talking about 40 years ago, I have never left my body again, and I've never had an experience of God. But that experience I had of God has been like my battery charger for my whole life. Because it took something that was so incomprehensible and so unknowable. And so, also because Western civilization has become so poisoned. The Sistine Chapel with God, touching Adam's finger and this whole thing. Like, that is so far off from what God is. And not that I even know anything about what God is. But that has poisoned people's minds so much that when people say to me, I don't believe in God, and I'll say to them, I don't believe in the same God you don't believe in. Because God is not what you think it is, And I think most people really do believe in God, but they don't realize it because they don't really realize what God is. And so then it's very interesting. So then going back to my teacher, she decides she's going to make a special group for the inner crowd, and she's going to channel. So we're all there once a week. I think I was seeing her 2 or 3 times a week at this point. I was seeing her for yoga classes, I was seeing her for meditation classes, and I'm seeing her for the inner circle classes, right? And so she's a very big part of my life at this point, and all these people are a very big part of my life. And she starts doing this channeling stuff. Now, I knew her really, really, really well. And she starts doing the channeling, and she opens up her mouth, and another personality and voice is coming through her. And it's really, really freaky. And this voice is telling us that we've all been together before, that we've all been brought together for a special purpose, that he identified himself as Lord Maitreya, that in 1984, this was in 1978, I think, I think it was 78, that there was going to be a planetary alignment which was going to topple the world, that all the banks were going to fail, that the world was going to fall apart, and that our group's job and mission was to get together enough food, clothing, blankets for 500 people for 2 years time. And my teacher had already bought a piece of land up in the Grand Teton Mountains. She had bought a horse trailer that's pretty big that you could transfer food and clothing and stuff in. And we were going to all go to this place that when everything started falling apart, we were going to go there. People were going to be directed to our refuge. And then after 2 years, the flying saucers were going to come down and rescue all of us. Okay? So I'm going, and we're not allowed to tell anybody, right? I felt like I was listening to Hitler or something. I mean, something about it turned me off so badly. And I'm meeting every week with this group, and then people start talking about how we have to get guns to protect ourselves because people know that we have all this stuff and the world falls apart. People are going to want to try to get it from us. And I'm starting to get more and more weirded out because I'm feeling like I'm not interested, first of all, I'm not interested in investing 6 years of my life into something that may or may not happen. And investing my life into this thing, you want it to happen. You just invested 6 years of your life into making sure that this refuge thing is happening. You want the world to fall apart. Right? It's like, and I started thinking about all the people I love, who aren't a part of our special group. And I said, forget it, I'm not innocent. And I dropped out. And at that point, my marriage was falling apart, big time. And I was kind of like, God is the most important thing in my life, and I cannot talk to my husband about it. Lo yicholiyot. I can't deal with this at all. So I went through 3 weeks of torture, trying to figure out what was I going to do, because I was really, really unhappy. And so one day I woke up in the morning, and I just knew I have to leave. So I told them on a Friday I'm leaving, and I think I left on Sunday, and we both cried a whole bunch, because I really loved him. He was a really good person, but I just said we have 2 different destinies, and it's like this fighting with each other and pulling against each other. It's just not working for me, And I need to go off and do what I need to do and find my destiny, and you need to go and do what you need to do. Now, I left out a very important part of the story, very important, is that I never could have, I was told when I was 18 years old that I would never have children. So the whole time I was in Idaho, I was in my early 20s, and all my friends are having babies, right? And all I want to do is get pregnant and have a baby. And every night I'm crying to God. Oh, this is after I found God, you know, that God should give me children. And my mother says she doesn't remember this, but my mother would say to me, like, I don't want you doing this. Like, you're only going to get disappointed. You're never going to have children. You have to accept it. And I said, no, I know God's going to give me children. I just know it. Like, I'm praying every day with my whole heart and soul, and I know God's going to answer my prayers. And my mother's like, God's never going to give you children. You can't have children. It's totally impossible. So that's a big part of this story, too, as a miracle of my life. So anyways, 3 days later, I make a party for my friends. I give away my turtle sewing machine. I give away my ice skates. I give away my food dehydrator. I give away I give away as much as I can give away to my friends. And I pack a bag, and I have like a little Volkswagen. I stick everything in the Volkswagen, and I take off for Canada because we live like 50 miles from the Canadian border. And I drive up to Canada, and almost immediately I'm having car problems. The car doesn't, like, I basically can't get the car to start. So I have to either be parked on the hill so I can push start it, or I have to have a hitchhiker in the car with me to push the car, right? And so I go up north, and then I go west towards British Columbia, and my car is just like limping across Canada, and I head for Bellingham, Washington. And the car basically limps into Bellingham, Washington. It's like dead. I pull into Bellingham, Washington, and I go to a mechanic, and I have like $200 or $300 on me, and that's it, right? And the mechanic basically says to me, it's going to cost you like, either he said the whole amount I had or almost the whole amount of money I had, right? And it's going to take 3 days till the car gets fixed. I don't know a soul. I don't know anybody. So I go to a hippie restaurant, like a hippie cafe kind of thing, and there's this guy with long hair and everything. And I order a cup of tea, and I'm like, listen, I have this problem. My car just broke down, and it's not going to be fixed for 3 days, and I don't have any money, and I have nowhere to stay, and I don't know anybody in town. Do you think you could help me? Like, do you know anybody? He says, give me a minute or two. Gets on the phone, comes back to me. He says, yeah, there's this place called the Pink House, or the Gray House. I think it's the Gray House. The Gray House. And they said you could stay there, but they're not a crash pad. So you can only stay for 3 days, and that's it. So Bellingham was a really interesting town. Bellingham was like this, it had a university in town, and then it had what was called like a free school or an alternative university or something like that. It had a lot of hippies living in this town. They had a cooperative tea house, they had a cooperative restaurant, they had a cooperative health food store, they had a cooperative craft store, like where you can go there with sewing machines and maybe a kiln and stuff like that. Very far out place. And then they had these things that were called land trust houses, where you'd have a group of people who would get together and they would buy a house together to save it from being demolished and turned into an apartment building or a parking lot or something like that. And it's all these old funky houses. And so this was one of these land trust houses. And so basically everybody paid rent, but their rent really was a mortgage payment. So I go to the house, and they say to me, well, you're really in luck because this guy who lives upstairs, so he's in Boston right now for he's going to be there for another week. And his room is free. So I move into the house, and immediately what happened in Bellingham was the whole town just went like to me. And then I met this person who said to me, I met this person who's like a yogi. I met like all these different tripped out people, and this lady was like, I'm going up to this yoga seminar in Canada. Why don't you come with me? I'll drive you up there, drive you back, you know. And I was like, at this point, I'm like living like on a dream kind of. Like I'm not, like money is just, everything's unreal. And I don't even know how somehow I had money to pay for the yoga conference thing, but somehow I did it because I don't know. And I was in this place of just trusting in God. And so I go up to the yoga conference, and I meet this whole group of like Canadian gypsies. They're like French Canadians, and they're traveling around. And they're working in orchards picking grapes, and they're living in the canyon, and they're just traveling around. And I'm like hanging out with them. And it's getting towards the end of the conference, and also I have to just say that this conference, this yoga conference, completely turned me off to yoga. Because they were doing all this stuff like swallowing 5 meters of gauze and then pulling it up and vomiting the whole time, and just doing and drinking salt water and vomiting and just like all this stuff that was so harsh to your body and just like for cleansing and purification. But I'm like, no thank you, this is not my thing. And also all the like different yoga positions, everything was like trying to show off how athletic they were, and I don't know, the whole thing kind of turned me off. And also I noticed that everybody is a Jew there practically, and they're all sitting around in these robes chanting in Sanskrit, doing this like ritual, right? And then there's a lot of Avodah Zorah going on also, and everybody's bowing down to all the statues, and I'm like something inside of me just wouldn't let me do that. And I'm like, and part of the reason I was on this whole journey that I went on was I was really searching for my spiritual path. Because I had outgrown the Idaho thing. And I knew that I needed to have a path to walk on. Because I felt like a lot of people who are spiritual, they go to Sufi dancing, they do this, they do that, and they're just like picking the flowers. And I'm like, gotta get in there and dig up the garden and plant the seeds and weed the garden and then watch the garden grow, because otherwise there's no growth. There's no growth. And I knew this at a very young age. And I was like, I want to be able to put one foot in front of the other and be able to look back in 10 years and see that I got someplace, that I'm not in the same place I was 10 years ago. So I was really seriously looking for a path. So when I went on this yoga retreat, it was like, maybe this is my path, you know? It's not my path.
זה לא הלך לי. ניסיתי הרי קרישנה וברחתי, אפילו סנטולוגיה לא עזר לי, אסטרולוגיה מרוב הפסיכולוגיה התבלבלתי, וכל אחד אומר לי זו הדרך שחיפשת, איך זה לא נתפסת.
So then the woman came to me who I came there with and said to me, like, are you coming back with me to Bellingham? And my reaction at first was, of course I'm coming back to Bellingham. Why wouldn't I be coming back to Bellingham? Because I always come back, right? And then I thought, I don't need to go back. I don't have a job. I don't have a husband waiting for me. I don't have a family waiting for me. I don't have any responsibilities waiting for me.
Your car was there?
My car was there, but at this point, I'm not attached to the car at all. I'm like, I don't need to go back. I'm free. And so I told her I wasn't going back with her. And I just started traveling with them. Living outside, living in the canyons, doing this, traveled to Vancouver Island, went to a music festival. So I basically ended up traveling around with these French Canadians for like 3 weeks. And by the time, and then I found, and at this point I've already plugged into the welfare system. So like I had a food stamp appointment in Bellingham. So I knew I had to get back to Bellingham in order to get my food stamps. So I get back to Bellingham like a month later, and my friend Marianne, who lived in the house, so where is she? She's gone away. She has gone to pick apples in Washington. And I decided I'm going to go join her there because I need money. I have no money. So I start hitchhiking, you know, to find her, to get to there. And I don't really know where I'm going exactly. And this guy picks me up who's like a cowboy. He's like a hippie cowboy. And he takes me, and that night I sleep in his teepee. And then the next morning, somehow I find the orchard. I might have had an address, I'm not sure. Somebody might have given me an address to get there. And I get to this farm, and it's all long-hair hippie musicians. Everybody. I mean, the guys have hair down to their waist, most of them. And there's little cabins to like be in. And I end up like getting a cabin with somebody this guy's name's Philip. We have a completely platonic relationship, and he's like this mad poet who's always like spouting poetry all the time, and I'm like picking apples all day, and then I'm baking apple pies and pear pies and making soups and because I was really into feeding people. That was my thing. When I was picking apples at the orchard, so my grandmother had this very rich husband at the time, and they were traveling all over the world. And she had bought me a pin in Scandinavia, gave it to my mother, and my mother mailed it to me. And I get the pin, and my mother always told me to be a good girl and write thank you notes to everybody, you know. And so I write a note to my grandmother, and I say to my grandmother, thank you so much for the pin, it's really beautiful. And by the way, I'm living in an orchard in eastern Washington, I'm picking apples. I'm like harvesting apples for the world, and it's just like living on a kibbutz in Israel.
My grandmother gets the letter from me, and she calls up my aunt on the phone, and she's crying to my aunt on the phone. And they both say at the end of my letter, oh, Israel! We'll send her to Israel, and she can pick all the apples she wants there.
And it went on for 3 weeks. And it was just this amazing, amazing, amazing experience. So when that was over, everybody split up, and a whole bunch of people were going to the barter fair. I get to the barter fair, and I'm there for like a week, and the barter fair is tripped out because people like have a box of tomatoes, and somebody else has handmade sweaters, and somebody else has jewelry, and somebody else has something else, pumpkins, and there's no money exchanged. So you want something, you have to find what they want, right? And then trade to get that thing, you know. So it's like a whole tripped out thing. Yeah, and so a whole bunch of the people that I was like picking apples with were at the barter fair. So I had like kind of like a family there. And then when the barter fair was over, everybody just kind of went shh, like that. And I was kind of like, oh no, where do I go? What do I do? Like up until that point, it was kind of always clear where the next place was going to be. And I got a ride. I think at some point I went back to Idaho for a little bit just to like check in, and and then I went back up to the place where I was picking grapes in Canada. I picked grapes for a couple of days in Canada, and I went back up there, and I met this guy named Alex who was 19, I was 24, and he was a really interesting guy because he had been living on his own since he was 16. He had been on the road, and he made his living shooting pool. And he was from Nova Scotia. He'd never met a Jew before in his life. And I don't know, we started traveling together. So also, when we were at the barter fair, I met up with a group of people that I had met at the yoga thing. And they were all meeting at this house in southern Washington to put together a magazine. It was basically like a resource magazine with people's phone numbers and addresses so people could get in touch with each other, because there was no email in those days, there was no cell phones in those days, and hippies had a hard time staying in touch with each other, right? So we were hitchhiking to this place in southern Washington together. This guy picked us up, gave us a ride. He took us right to my orchard where I had picked apples. We had a place to sleep that night. And then the next day we traveled to this place to do the magazine. Now we had this really interesting day traveling because every single thing we talked about that day happened, right? So we're in a car and we see a big advertisement for the John Birch Society. And it says, get us out of the United Nations. And we're like talking about it, right? Next thing we know, this woman picks us up, and in the back seat of her car are all these John Birch Society literature, right? Then we get out of the car, and we start talking about women in the armed forces, right? The next person who picks us up is a woman soldier in uniform, okay? Then Alex is sitting talking to me about how he made a living at shooting pool, right? The next guys who pick us up tell us they're on their way to a pool hall to shoot pool. Would you like to go with them? So at this point, I'm really believing in the magic of the universe, right? Then we're on the road, and I said to him, okay, I want a rich black person in a fancy car to pick us up and take us out for dinner. The next person who picks us up is this wealthy black woman in like a Lincoln Continental who picks us up and turns around and says to us, do you guys need money? Can I give you any money? Like, do you need anything? One of our rides, oh, and then the ride there was another ride that day.
The magical mystery.
The other ride that day, when we were first leaving the Seattle area, I had 2 backpacks. I had the one on my back with my clothes, and I had another pack on my front that had my jewelry, my letters, my phone book, my money, my glasses, all my crystals, my teas, everything that was like my fun stuff was on my front pack. I had just said to Alex that morning, that day, that everything that manifested that day, I had said to Alex, I cannot stand having these 2 backpacks. It's just too much for me. It's too heavy. I can't deal with it, right? This woman picks us up to give us a ride. We throw all of our packs in the back of her truck. We get into the truck, and she takes off. And right away, I don't know, Alex starts talking to her, and we realize she's going the wrong direction. So she says, okay. She pulls over to let us out. And Alex starts taking all the packs out of the back of the truck. And I could swear that I saw him take out all my stuff. The lady drives away, and I look on the ground, and my pack with my money, my glasses, my crystals, my jewelry, my phone book is gone. It's not. So I have like FS at this point, And Brucha At, I didn't need glasses like I need them now. But there was a lot of things that were really hard for me without my glasses, like typing and different things. So that was a trip. So we finally get to, so we have this really like magical mystery tour day that took us forever to get to this place that should have taken a few hours, right? We get there, and there's this whole group of wonderful people. And the funniest thing is there's this couple who are married. They have a little boy, and they were like the artists. They were doing all the illustrations on the thing. And she was always saying, what a blessing! What a blessing! Like all the time, right? Right? And my name at this point is Bonet. Philip one day decides he's going to take me to meet his friends in Southern Oregon who are tree planters. So I'm like traveling in this whole alternative, tripped out, and I'm like, I had said to him at one point, like, I have to change my name because I can't introduce myself as Bonnie anymore. Like, I just don't feel like it's my name. And I said, we're going to be together, living together for like 3 weeks, totally platonic. And like, I think you're going to know me better than anybody, and I want you to give me a name, right? So we're thinking of all these crazy names like Unity and Crystal and blah, blah, blah. One is more nauseating than the next. And I can't figure out what I'm going to, like, I don't know what to do anymore. And we go down to Southern Oregon to meet his friends. And he goes to introduce me to his friends. And he goes, and this is my friend, Bonnie. And I was like, I like that. Right? And instantly everybody's calling me Bonnet, right? So when we get back to the orchard, and everybody at the orchard was no, we like your name, Bonnie, we don't want you to change your name. When I got back to the orchard and I told them my name was Bonnet, everybody loved it. And that became my name instantly. Oh, so we go to this house, and we live in this house for 3 weeks. A lot of the things I did lasted 3 weeks, which was really interesting. I was kind of at a point where I couldn't stay. I was in Bellingham, Washington for 3 weeks. I was traveling in British Columbia for 3 weeks. I was writing the magazine for 3 weeks. It was like every 3 weeks I had to change locations. I had like Kotzim b'Mechnasayim kind of, Thank you.
It's the best.
So I'm living in this house with this whole group of people, and they are really high neshamas. And there's this guy, so like we have the 2 illustrators, and we have the people who write, and the people who type, And there's this guy named Harmony, and he like plays music, and every day before our before like we had 2 meals a day, it was somebody different's turn to do the cooking, and we would sit around and make a circle, and we would sing, and the guy would play guitar, and it was just this really utopian kind of, and this guy had given us his house to like live in, to do this, right? So this was like this really, really amazing experience with this group of people. And then we finished, and everybody was doing this again. I mean, this kept happening as everybody kept, you know, spreading out and going around. So I meet this one, so I hitchhike up to British Columbia with this woman named No Guns, because I really don't want to hitchhike by myself. No Guns, she dressed all in white, like a white sheath dress. Her hair was up in like a knot on the top of her hair, and she had a toothbrush on a string around her neck. And she was all raw, and she had a son that she traveled with, and she was like a radical feminist, you know, hated men kind of thing. And she's got a son, and all her son wants is peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, toys, some kind of G.I. Joe toy, and to basically just live in one place and not be traveling around all the time. So I'm traveling with the two of them, and they're fighting like cats and dogs the whole time, and I'm like, oh my God. And she tells me that she's making this gathering down in Arizona in January. And she gives me this flyer called the Mother's Vision Council, and I should come to it. And Alex and I end up, we end up hitchhiking down to, we get a ride with one of the guys to Southern Oregon. And then we're in Northern California, and we're trying to hitchhike down the coast of Northern California, and we get picked up by this van of hippies, and they are on their way to Newport Beach, and they're picking up hitchhikers along the way, and we're traveling on the Coast Highway, and the whole California coast is locked up behind barbed wire, right? And at one point we stop in like a park to sleep overnight, and the police come and like kick us out. Another time we like find a hole in the fence and go down to the beach.
Why is it closed off?
Because it's all private property. Mm-hmm. We go down to the beach. It was Thanksgiving Day actually, and this guy comes down with a shotgun and tells us we have to leave. And we're kind of like, you know. So I said to them, well, I know about this lady, because I had this friend Israel that was living in the house with us doing the magazine, and he told me he has this wonderful friend, and her name was something like Walala, and he told me there's this town called Guarana, and Walala is in Guarana, and like if I pass through this town, I should go visit her because she's a really far out person, right? So we get to the town of Guarana, and I'm traveling with this whole group of people, right? So we get to this town of Guarana. It's nighttime already. We go. It's a small town. There's like a restaurant, a tavern, and a gas station, and some houses, right? So we go into the tavern, and we ask them, do you know where this woman named Walala lives? And they're like, yeah, she lives on this street over there in the greenhouse, blah, 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 blah. So we find her house, and I get out of the van and knock on the door, and these two young people answer the door, and I'm like, is Walala here? And they're like, no, she's out of town. They said, can we help you? And I said, well, I have this friend, and he told me that if I was like traveling through Guarana, that I should come and meet your mother, that she's a really cool person. And I kind of need a place to stay tonight. And they're like, well, you're welcome to stay. And I'm like, well, I'm like traveling with this whole group of people, and you know, there's about like 6 of us in this van. Like, would it be okay if they pitch a tent in your yard? I mean, this is after I've been, you know, police and shotguns and all sorts of craziness, you know. And they're like, well, you don't have to stay in the yard. You can come and stay in the house. I'm sure Walala would be perfectly fine with that, right? And she lets us in her house, and it was like Thanksgiving Day that day, right? So they pull out all this food out of the refrigerator, pumpkin pie and turkey and all this food. Are you hungry? Please eat. And it was such a contrast to our earlier experiences. Like, it was unbelievable. Anyway, we get to LA, And we were going to go to the Mother's Vision Council, and we had to meet up in Tempe, Arizona, and my parents were like, we're buying you a round trip bus ticket so you're not hitchhiking. Okay, great, good, I probably even gave me some money too, I'm not sure, right? They send us, so we get on the bus, we're 3 weeks in LA, we get on the bus, we go to Tempe, Arizona, and we're like the first people there, and they say, oh good, you're part of Seed Camp, and you're going to be like the first group of people to go out to the site, and it's like hours and hours and hours out in the desert, right? And it's January. January is freezing cold in the desert. We're not allowed, and this is no guns trip, okay? This is no guns. This is, she has organized the whole thing. We're not allowed to make fires because fires hurt Mother Earth. We're not allowed to eat cooked food because cooked food is evil, right? We can only have raw food. I mean, you know how freezing cold I was there? We're living on sprouts, grapefruit, and dates, right? I'm there for like a day or two, and then this whole group of people arrive on a bus. And that's where I met Shalom Gold. Shalom Gold showed up. Shalom Gold is in Yerushalayim. He's like this Rav in Yerushalayim now, but he was a guru of this like spiritual community in Eden Hot Springs, Healing Waters, Eden Hot Springs, Arizona, and he would call everybody to worship with a conch shell, and he had all his like disciples, right? And he shows up with a whole contingent of people, and he's in a teepee, and he's wearing a loincloth, and it's a trip. And it's really also was really interesting. There was a whole bunch of people that I met all along the way. That I met in Bellingham, Washington, that I met here, that I met there. People that I needed to make little tikkunim with, like that the energy wasn't so good or so clear between us. From my point of view, it was usually because they weren't nice to me, because people in the whole hippie movement were very snobby. They were very snobby. It's like, if you shave your legs, if you wear pants, if you shave under your arms, if your hair's not down to your waist, like you're just not cool enough, right? So part of the craziness of this gathering was that the day after it was supposed to start, and No Guns is there, of course, right? And the day after it's supposed to start, and we're all in the middle of the desert, and there's no way of getting out of the desert. There's a school bus and a truck, and that's it. And you cannot get out on your own. And we're there for like 10 days altogether, but the second day of the gathering, these 3 guys show up, and they don't want to let them into the gathering because A, their women kick them out, B, because they eat cooked food, and C, because they got there late. And that becomes this huge debate and issue in the camp. The Mother's Vision Council camp, okay? Right? And they're sitting and debating this back and forth, right? About whether or not they should let these guys into the camp. And I'm like, this is sick. This is sick. At this point, I am totally sick of hippies. Okay? Because I'm like, they are just as hypocritical. They're just as prejudiced. They have superiority complexes about the stupidest things. They're shallow. And I can't deal with hippies anymore. And I went into a huge crisis because this was my new identity, right? Anyway, then the men, they had this thing that they wanted the women to sit around in a circle and talk, and they pass the medicine ball around and around and around. Everybody talks until they have nothing left to say, and the men sit around the outside and listen to everything the women say, and then the men sit in the middle and the women do the same with the men. For some reason, they decided to start with the guys. I don't remember why. So the guys start talking about how when they're at these hippie gatherings and the women are walking around topless, naked, that it really turns them on, right? And the women hear this and flip out. And then it becomes 2 separate camps. The women will have nothing to do with the men. They do not want the men to hear anything they have to say. And the women move into their own separate space and are like, the men are out there, right? These are people who have come together to talk about world peace, basically. Okay, how to make world peace. Milton's was a very big, radical women feminist, so she was really feeding the fire, right? So then the women start talking, and every single woman there is talking about how they got raped by their brother, they got raped by their brother's friend, they got raped by their father, they got raped by their by their stepfather, they got raped by their mother's boyfriend. And I'm like sitting there going, oh my God. I am blown away. I'm like, all those years I thought I grew up in this really boring family,
Thank God.
Oh my gosh.
Thank God.
Oh my gosh. Every woman there had another story to tell. None of them are Jews, very few Jews. And I couldn't believe my ears, right? But at this point, I'm so disgusted by everything that's going on that I got to get out of there. I got to leave. And I'm saying to Alex, I got to get out of here. I can't stay here any longer. And we find out that this one guy that we really liked, that he had to fly back to Detroit, and he had a flight. And so somebody had to take him to the airport. Right? And so Shalom Gold, his name was like Medicine Eagle or something like that at the point, he was the owner of the truck. And so it was decided that he would drive the guy to the airport. Well, as soon as I find out that there's a truck leaving, I'm out of here now, right? So Alex and I get into the truck, and Shalom Gold starts working on me. How could you leave? You came here for seed camp. You traveled all the way from British Columbia to come to this. You have to start what you finished. Okay, it's been hard for you, but like you need to finish what you started. And he's going for 4 hours. He's doing this to me. Okay, we get to the airport, drop the guy off at the airport, and my boyfriend the whole time is going, I'm not going back. I don't want to go back. I'm not going back. And I'm like, I'm this person that you can influence me at times, And I was like, okay, I'll go back and finish, right? I don't want to, but okay, I hear what you're saying. Got to finish what I started, even though it wasn't pleasant. And the whole time I'm like, why? Like the whole time, the whole journey that I've been taking, I've seen Hashem's hand in everything, right? And I can't figure out why Hashem has sent me to this disgusting, horrible experience that was so painful for me, and so, like, I couldn't figure it out at all. So we get back the next morning. We've driven 4 hours to the airport and 4 hours back. We get back at dawn, and it turns out the first thing that happens is that the woman, the day before we left, this woman had eaten too much like cayenne pepper on her sprouts, and she was flipping out. And I gave her my bowl to eat my food. And nobody had forks and spoons, and everybody's like eating like this, So her saliva is all over my food and all over my bowl. And there was a rule in the camp that no one's allowed to eat out of your bowl because of hepatitis, the fear of spreading hepatitis. And I was kind of like, who cares? This woman is suffering, and I have to give her my food, like something to cool off her mouth a little bit, So I get back the next morning with Shalom Gold, and we discovered that this woman who ate out of my bed, that she has hepatitis. She just came down with hepatitis, and she's really sick. And I'm like, oh my God, thank God I came back. Because I was scheduled to go to Israel in 3 weeks. I would have either gotten so sick I couldn't have gone to Israel, or I would have gone to Israel and gotten really, really sick. It's the last day of the gathering. It's really interesting because we came back and it was the last day of the gathering. I don't think I even realized it was just one day left. And they finally decided to get it together, all the men, all the women. We're all sitting in one big circle. They pass the medicine bowl. Everybody gets up and gives over their vision of peace. And I might have said something to the fact that here we are, this group of people who all supposedly have a similar vision of things, and we can't get it together. That's really sad. How is the world supposed to get it together? I don't know if I said that or not. I might have, I might not have. Anyway, and then I was kind of like, oh, by the way, I'm looking for a healer, and I'm going to Israel in like 3 weeks. Everything was 3 weeks. Do you know that? Everything's 3 weeks. I'm going to Israel in 3 weeks. And if anybody knows of a healer in Israel, please let me know. And I sit down and I'm like, why did I just say that? That's like the weirdest thing, because who in this group of people is going to know about a healer in Israel? Like, what a weird thing to say. This guy comes up to me and he said, my name is Iser, and I lived in Israel for 8 years. And he was like in his 50s or so. And he said, I know of a healer in Israel. He said, you need a paper and pen. He said, I think he was a homeopath. He said he diagnoses by looking at fingernails. And he said he moves around a lot, and because what he does is considered illegal by the government, so he's in different places all the time. So on Monday he's in Tel Aviv, and you can contact his secretary or the person who his contact person between 2 and 3 o'clock. Her name is this. Here's the telephone number. Tuesday he's in Haifa, same thing, contact person, telephone number. Wednesday, Jerusalem, contact person, blah, 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 blah. And I've got this huge sheet of all this information about how to get in touch with him. And then he says to me, oh, by the way, he says, there's this place you should go visit when you're in Israel. It's called Modi'in. And you take the 10 o'clock bus out of Wood. So Hashem took me on this whole convoluted journey to meet this guy. It's so unbelievable. So anyway, that night, the people are we're still hanging out there. And that night, I don't have anywhere to sleep because my boyfriend has a tent in Tempe. So this guy says to me, oh, you can sleep in my teepee, right? So I go and sleep in the guy's teepee. In the morning I get up and these women say to me, oh my God, you slept in his teepee? Don't you know he had scabies and he had staph infection and he had some other kind of weird, disgusting thing? And I was like, thank God I slept with all my clothes on. But then I get really sick. I get really, really sick. I get a really, really bad cold and running the fever and feeling awful. And we drive back. We finally get back to Tempe, Arizona. Got this heavy backpack on my back. And I'm just crying because I'm so sick. And all I want to do is lay down in bed and go to sleep. And we're in the middle of a city with all these cars and traffic and fumes. And we have no money. And I know nobody there. Can't find my friends. And I start crying, and I said, I want to go home. And I'm like, but I don't have a home to go home to, right? And he says to me, yes, you do. You can go back to your parents' home. In fact, you have a round-trip ticket back to LA. And so that night, he stuck me on the bus back to LA. And I got to LA. Oh, and we went to the hospital and did a gamma globulin shot, so I wouldn't get hepatitis. And on top of that, I went to the laundromat and I boiled all my clothes. Get back to LA, I'm broken as anything. I'm lost. I don't know what to do with I'm going to Israel in 3 more weeks. Don't know what to do. Don't know who I am. Don't know where I'm going to live. And sometime along the way, I find this piece of paper in the back of my blue jeans. And I pull it out of my pants, and I'm like, what's this? And I open it up, and everything has washed off the paper, except the 10 o'clock bus would Modine.
Return to who you are, return to what you are, return to where you are, born and reborn again.
And I have a photographic memory a little bit. So all I had to do was see it one time, and it was just that I remembered it. So I get to Israel, and I go to kibbutz. They send me to kibbutz, and I'm on this kibbutz down in the Negev, and I hate it. My kibbutz father's making passes at me. Every time I leave the kibbutz, I have men like everybody's making passes at me everywhere. Of course, I wasn't just snooty because I had no idea about snoot and how, and this is the Middle East and all that kind of stuff. The people I worked with and like my bosses in the Heder Ochel, my bosses, they were always screaming and yelling at me. It was like a horrible experience. I made friends with some of the people on the kibbutz, like my other volunteers or whatever. I was in the Ulpan. I'm the only one in the Ulpan who has no intention of staying in Israel. Like, none. There's like all these people like, oh, I love Israel, I want to move here, it's so wonderful. You know, I'm like, no way, Jose. No way, Jose. And my grandmother has bought me a round-trip ticket to go back to LA, and I'm sitting and thinking about, like, maybe I will cash in my ticket and I'll go to India. And I decide I'm leaving the kibbutz. And the kibbutz, basically, they had a special program that they ran that that every like week or two they would bring a group of the kids from the Ulpan to Jerusalem or Tel Aviv, and they would have like a 2 or 3 day seminar, and they would talk about the economics of Israel, the politics of Israel, the religions of Israel. Like, you know, they give you a whole thing, and I kind of like wanted to do that, right? And so I went to the Ulpan, you know, principal, and I said to her, do you have any room for me in the program? And she said no. So I was like, okay. Then she comes to me like the day before the thing's happening, and she says to me, I have an opening, do you want to go? And I'm like, yeah. So we go, we do the thing, and one of the things they do is they take us to Yad Vashem, right? And they take us to Yad Vashem, and they start talking about, you know, it wasn't just the Nazis that killed us, it was basically all of Europe that killed us. And I don't know, it just got me thinking. And I started thinking about how, like, the only view I really had of Israel was from this kibbutz. And I'm just looking through a little teeny keyhole, and I'm not getting the whole picture at all. And maybe I should stay a little longer. Because once I leave, I'm never coming back. So I remember Modim, 10 o'clock bus Lud. Gee, I think I'll go. So I missed the 10 o'clock bus in Lud. I ended up having to hitchhike. I hitchhiked with Simcha Betten. That was when I first met him. He was the guy who walks around in the Yemenite outfit, you know.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, but he was
in Lud?
He was in Lud coming to the Moshav. And he dressed like a Chabadnik in those days. And we get to the Moshav, and we go in. Now, also, I have to, when I was on the kibbutzniks thought I was really weird. Because I ate with chopsticks. I was growing sprouts in the closet. I only drank herbal tea. I didn't eat sugar. I was doing yoga. I was meditating. Like, this is in 1979. This was not mainstream. It's now mainstream, but not in 1979. And they just thought I was whacked. Totally whacked and straight. They all thought I was very straight because I wasn't promiscuous. Because a lot of the women, a lot of people on kibbutz and the volunteers and stuff were extremely promiscuous. So I get to the Moshav, and I walk into the volunteer house. Was Shalom's old house. I walk into that house, and they hand me, and Yaakov Sachs is there, and they hand me a plate with tofu, brown rice, salad, and a chapati, and chopsticks, right? And I was like, welcome home, Brucha, or Bani, or whatever, Bonnet. You know, welcome home. And then I'm walking down the street over here, and I see this man in the distance. It's the first day I got there. I was on the Moshav for maybe an hour. I see this guy in the distance, and this little voice in my head goes, oh, there he is, with a capital H and quotation marks. And he has 2 or 3 kids. It might have been Onig and Esty, or I know Esty was definitely one of them, maybe Elyon, like clutching his knees, and he's got a goat on a leash, and he looks up and he smiles at me and says, hi, how are you? What's your name? And I said, Bonet. And he says, well, do you have a Hebrew name? I'm like, Brucha. he says, "Oh, Brucha, what a beautiful name." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, I like that." And then he introduced me to everybody on the Moshav as Brucha. And I never had to go through that thing of changing my name here. It just instantly became my name. And then I said to Yankala, could you tell me what it means to be a Jew? Because when I came to Israel, I was asking all the Israelis that question. And not one of them could answer me satisfactory. Most of the time I got, oh, it means that they want to kill you. The Nazis wanted to kill you. The Arabs want to kill you. But nobody... And he said to me, it means that you're the great-great-great-granddaughter of Avraham Avinu, and that we're all one big mishpacha, one big family. It means that you stood on Har Sinai, and you had a revelation of God. And it means that your whole life is about serving God. And I just went, well, I guess I'm a Jew. I guess that's it. It took me a little while. It took me a little while to deal with, Shabbos. And I think I wrote and listened to music or something. I'm not listening to music because I didn't have anything with earplugs in those days. But I think I wrote a letter to my mother on Shabbos the first time. But it was just kind of like I got my Hebrew name. I decided I'm going to be a Jew. He invited me for Shabbos. Then he brings me into his house, right? Daphne is his metapelet, okay? She's taking care of my kids. And I walk in the door and she goes, Baruch Hashem, you got here. We've been praying for you to show up. We've been waiting for you to come. And I'm like, how does she know? How does she know? It was so tripped out. I was here for Shabbos, and then Yankala asked me to marry him Motzi Shabbos. And I was totally head over heels in love with him because he was the quintessential hippie guy. And he was spiritual, really spiritual. And, and he made up a song for me and sang to me and he was on his best behavior for me, and just I had no choice. I was sucker, And the kids hated me because I was stealing their Abba's attention away from them. And Abba's already had a whole bunch of girlfriends, and I was just another one as far as they were concerned. And so when the kids were very, very small, I kept promising them, I'm never going to leave you. I'm never going to leave you. I'm always going to be here for you. Esty was the first to call me Ima, of course. She started after 6 months. I don't remember when Oneg and Elyon jumped on the... Elyon particularly hated me because Yanka used to walk around carrying Elyon all the time. Elyon was his baby. And he was particularly threatened by me that I was taking his Abba away from him. Oneg was just broken legamre, and Nama was don't be nice to her because we want our Ima to come back. Nama took 3 years. And basically her friends blackmailed her and told her, if you don't start calling Brucha Ima, we're not talking to you anymore. So what happened is we were having a really hard time bonding as a family. And remember Minna Amsel? Minna Amsel was really good friends with Yankala. She was this wealthy woman, and her husband was a diamond dealer or something, and she loved Yankala, and she was always helping him, and she decided that she had Meiser money that she was going to give us, and that we could move to the old city in Jerusalem for 6 months, and she paid our rent for 6 months and gave us money to live on for 6 months, so that we would be in a place where the kids knew nobody but me, and they would have to come to me. So when we moved back to the Moshav, we were more of a family. So I met Shalom. He was one of the Moshav, was a Shitufi at that point, right? So the Moshav sent the van out to move us from Jerusalem back to the Moshav after 6 months. And Shalom was one of the moving guys with Morty Guest. I can't believe they sent Morty Guest when I think about it now, right? But we had no furniture. We had nothing. We had nothing. We had I had nothing. I had no possessions. Yanko had no possessions. We had no furniture, so there was just basically some of our clothes, and that was about it. Maybe a few pots and pans, not too much to move. And that was the first time I met Shalom, and he was 23 years old, and I'm all of 26 at this point, and I've got 4 children, and I'm an Ima. And I looked at him and I thought, what a baby. Yeah, and then about 6 months after we were married, I realized, oh, Hashem used Yankele as the worm on the hook, but the whole reason I married him was because I needed to be with the kids. And Shalom actually came to my get with me. And then Shalom and I are driving in the car home from the get, and I say to him, so Shalom, now that I'm divorced, like if I want to go out to the movies or go out to dinner, because I had a car at the time, like, you want to go with me? Can I call you? And he's like, no. I'm like, no? What are you talking about? And he's like, I don't go out with like single women on casual dates. Shalom had been like single for 7 years or something at this point, with like raising Brucha on his own. I said, but Shalom, we've been friends all these years. He was like my Ben Byatt. I don't go out on casual dates with single women. So Shalom calls me a month later and asks if I want to go on a walk with him on Shabbos. And I'm completely blown away because you know what this means. Not a casual date. And I have no, like, Shalom was like I loved Shalom, but he was like my little brother. He was like the last person in the world I would ever think I was going to marry. We go out on this date, on this walk around the Moshav, and I come home and I'm completely blown away. Because his energy towards me was like a man towards a woman. And he had never acted that way towards me before. He'd always been like a brother. And it made me realize that all these years he was attracted to me, and he always kept his energy in check and was a good boy. And that really impressed me a lot with him. And the thing that was the most amazing for me was that I came to Israel kind of like I was in the Midbar. I had no identity. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was just empty and broken. And all of a sudden, this community and Shlomo, all of a sudden I was a Jew. And I had purpose in my life, and I had meaning in my life, and I had a family to take care of. And this is the girl who couldn't have children. I was told at 18 I would not have any children. And now I have 5 kids. And I'm going to have my 16th grandchild, Bezrat Hashem, is going to be born in a week or any time now. And so, like, I feel like my life has been a total miracle. I feel like Hashem brought me here, directed my life, and I'm just really thankful for everything I have. Okay, and interestingly enough, after all these 3-week tekufot that I went through, my Tuvas Zehut number is 0163 193 03.
2, 3, 4. If I could show you the way, I would shine like the sun in your eyes. If I could find the words to say the way I feel is beyond me sometimes. Na 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 na, na 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 na, na 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 na. If I could show you the way, and I would shine like the sun in your eyes. If I could find the words to say I feel is beyond.